friends by your side. We can take you high. Just take a look right in the book with reading rangers. You're reading rangers. Howie and the reading rangers.
Hi friends, welcome back to Camp Read A Lot. I'm Ranger Donnie, and today we'll be working on our Alaska badge. Today we'll be reading Little Brother Moose by James Casprin, illustrated by Carolyn Hallman. Let's hop into it. Little Brother Moose by James Casprin, illustrated by Carolyn Hallman. Long ago, the Alcuin Indians lived with many animals in the woods. They thought of all parts of the earth and all animals as family. They named the moose Mas or Maswa, which meant twig eaters in their language. Today, moose still live in northern regions of the world. This is a story of a moose. At sunrise, Mas took a drink from the big lake. He had traveled next to ice-covered water for days. Today, the lake greeted him with open water. He drank the cold, clean water and then stood still. Mas listened. To the north, the east, then his ears twitched to the south. Laughter. The laughter of a small stream as it reached the lake after a long spring journey. Mas stepped into the laughing stream. He smelled the musty odor of the bog carried in its water. He listened again, this time to a small voice within him. The voice did not speak through his ears alone, but through his eyes, his ears, his nose, his whole body. He first heard the voice last year when he still ran with his mother, but it was more than her voice alone. It carried on the wind, spoke through the seasons, shouted out in hunger, and signaled through the movement of an approaching wolf. Mas listened to the voice when he made his decision. The voice spoke of the bog. "Come home, little brother." Mas followed the river through the morning. Wet snowflakes began to fall. He crossed a meadow and stopped to munch on willow tips. Soon, his meals would be green shoots of spring. He noticed a new smell. Danger. There, upstream. The voice was speaking again. Leave the river. Mas climbed the riverbank. He heard the sound of another river over a hill. This river roared as if it was filled with spring water pounding against rocks. He climbed to see the new river. The river was unlike any that he'd seen before. It was full of speed and power. The voice whispered, "Danger. Return to the creek." But the river called loudly, "Follow me." Mas stayed on the high ridge and followed the river. He forgot about the bog. He chased excitement, a new smell, a new movement, a new river. After a while, the roar stopped. The river looked different. There was no movement. Mas approached the river cautiously. He stepped to enter the river and stood on its surface. This was a hard river. A creature with wild, shining eyes passed him suddenly. It bellowed louder than any moose had ever heard before. Mas ran. Mas was away from the danger, but he didn't stop running. Although the smell of the creature still burned his nose, it was a new smell. It was exciting. It called him onward. By late afternoon, Mas was still walking. His stomach told him it was time to eat, but he could find no willow tips. There were no laughing streams to follow, only hard rivers. He followed a hard river until it ended between two cliffs. He stood the night there. At daybreak, he was chased by another wild-eyed creature. He ran between the many cliffs of the New World. The roar of the hard rivers was all around him. Mas stopped running in the clearing. It was filled with wild-eyed creatures. Their eyes were dark and they all stood still. He quietly walked past the sleeping creatures. Mas was hungry and thirsty. He listened for the sound of water. There it was, a faint hollow trickle. Mas followed the sound. It was coming from a hole near his feet. He lowered his nose near the hole. He saw water flowing a few feet beneath him. It was a stream of outreach, behind a grate. He looked for food. He found some trees with vines connected to them. They had no leaves or buds, only spikes that rose beyond his reach. He nibbled at one. The metallic taste sent him down the alley. He smelled for food in the air. It was woody and pungent like cedar. The odor became stronger as he walked. He could see stacks of large brown mushrooms with steam rising from them. He couldn't reach them. It was time to go home. Moss had to find the bog. Where was the voice? He heard nothing but the roar of the activity surrounding him. He smelled nothing familiar. He saw nothing that looked like home. He spent the day and night by some small trees. He nibbled on the trees, but they were not enough. Everything around Moss was constantly changing. New creatures approached him. They stood away from him and pointed. Moss was surrounded by colors, shapes, smells, and the sound that were unknown in the bog. He was alone and could not hear the voice. He was frightened. As evening came, Moss was less afraid. He was getting used to the noise and movement of this busy world, but it was not his world. He had had enough of its excitement. He wanted to go home if he could find a way. Where was the voice? At dawn, he listened. Honk, honk. There was motion above. A V shape was flying through the dawn. Honk, honk, geese. They were calling to him. He followed, heard the voices in their calls. The geese flew out of sight. He traveled in the direction that they flew. Just as he began to feel lost again, he listened. Honk, honk, another flock. They were low. He reached out his long neck to touch them. Then, on the breeze, he caught a whiff. The bog. He could smell his home on the geese. The voice was speaking again. I am here. Follow me. Come home. Moss walked for the whole day. The busy world was now behind him. The geese kept coming. They pointed the way. By evening, Moss was far from the last hard river. He found some willow tips and ate. Then he heard it. Laughter. The laughter of a small stream. He leapt in. The voice spoke clearly now. The feel of the water, its gentle laughter, and the smell of the bog just upstream. They all said one thing. Welcome home, little brother. The end. Thanks for reading along. My challenge for you is to write down the last time that you saw Moose. What was the moose doing?